Norway's coastline is famous for its frozen, untouched fjords. But just over the horizon, massive industrial rigs pull thousands of barrels of gas and oil from the icy Arctic waters every single day. When the invasion of Ukraine severed Europe's energy ties with Russia, a severe supply vacuum opened up overnight. Norway stepped in to fill the void, taking over 30% of the European Union's gas market. That surge in demand generated a €108 billion windfall for the Norwegian government in a matter of 2 years. This document is Norges Bank's 2025 annual report. It records the sovereign wealth fund surging past 21 trillion Norwegian kroner, roughly $2 trillion. Meanwhile, Norway allocated only about $3 billion to support Ukraine. This disparity led European politicians to accuse the country of clinging to war-driven gains, benefiting financially while neighbors face the direct costs of conflict. By becoming Europe's indispensable energy supplier, Norway concentrated an immense amount of wealth within its borders. But that exact same wealth has turned the country into a highly visible, highly lucrative target on the geopolitical map. Norway has spent decades positioning itself as a global environmental leader, citing its vast hydropower grid and world-leading electric vehicle sales as proof of a greener future. But the hard data tells a different story. In the 2026 Climate Change Performance Index, the country's ranking dropped to 11th place. This document outlines Norway's climate commitments. Look closely. They don't cut all their own emissions, instead relying heavily on purchasing external carbon credits abroad. The strategy contains a loophole excluding Scope 3 emissions, ignoring the environmental impact of the oil and gas they sell. This split-screen chart shows the scale of that paradox. On the left, almost 90% of new cars sold in Norway are electric. On the right, the country exports roughly 500 megatons of CO2 equivalent through oil and gas every single year. Dependent on these exports, Norway actively blocks international efforts to phase out fossil fuels, explicitly refusing to join groups like the Beyond Oil and Gas Alliance. They are effectively funding a domestic green utopia by selling the exact hydrocarbons that are currently melting their own geographic defenses in the Arctic. Svalbard sits in the Arctic Ocean, midway between NATO member Norway and Russia's militarized Kola Peninsula. The 1920 Svalbard Treaty grants sovereignty to Norway, but guarantees all signatories equal rights to exploit its resources. Crucially, it forbids naval bases, effectively making it a demilitarized zone. This unique legal environment allows for Infolawfare. This strategy combines legal manipulation and coordinated propaganda to outmaneuver an opponent, entirely bypassing the need for traditional military hardware. By weaponizing the fine print of a century-old treaty, an adversary can lay claim to the vast resources of a NATO territory without ever firing a single shot. Russian state-owned company Arctic Ugal operates 2 coal mining settlements on Svalbard, Barentsburg and Pyramiden. These are active Russian company towns operating directly on Norwegian soil. Over the last few years, Moscow has used these settlements to stage deliberate physical provocations. On May 9th, the mining company began organizing highly visible Victory Day parades through the streets. Inside a strictly demilitarized zone, these processions carry Soviet flags and paramilitary symbols. Russian military-style Mi-8 helicopters loop at low altitude over the town, drawing official fines for violating local flight regulations. While the physical pressure mounts on the ice, the legal assault takes place through diplomatic channels. Moscow has officially accused Norway of violating the 1920 treaty by unfairly restricting Russian access to drilling rights on the surrounding continental shelf. Simultaneously, Russian state media pushes coordinated narratives claiming that Norway is illegally discriminating against Russian citizens. Some broadcasts even hint that Russia might have to take the islands by force to protect its historical claims. When you layer the legal challenges with the media propaganda and the physical displays, the pattern becomes clear. This is a coordinated pressure campaign. It is designed to exhaust the Norwegian government until they cede access to the Arctic's untapped mineral wealth. Moscow's pressure on Svalbard's resources is the first step in a larger plan to reorganize the regional hierarchy. Moscow has recently announced plans to convert the mostly abandoned mining town of Pyramiden into a new international scientific research center, explicitly meant for the BRICS nations. Because the Svalbard Treaty guarantees equal access for commercial and scientific enterprises, this provides a perfect legal loophole. It gives Russia a sanctioned mechanism to invite major non-Arctic powers directly into the region. Under the cover of academic research and cultural exchange, Russia can effectively embed partner nations like China and India right into NATO's northernmost backyard. Establishing a permanent multinational presence on the archipelago creates a new geopolitical reality. It surrounds Norwegian territory with adversarial proxies and rewrites the rules of engagement in the High North. Norway sits on a fortress of wealth worth over $2 trillion, but money cannot buy a shield against asymmetric lawfare. As nations exploit century-old treaties to establish new footholds, the scramble for the Arctic has escalated, and the ice beneath NATO's northern flank is beginning to crack. For centuries, thick Arctic sea ice formed a physical barrier along Norway's coast. Today, that ice is breaking apart, erasing the country's geographic isolation and leaving its northern flank wide open. To secure this newly exposed territory, NATO launched an overarching operational mission known as Arctic Sentry. Led by Joint Force Command Norfolk, the mission is designed to counter the military buildup on Russia's Kola Peninsula, home to the Northern Fleet and its concentration of nuclear-armed submarines. As part of this defense, the UK just doubled its deployment of Royal Marine Commandos at Norway's Camp Viking, increasing the force from 1,000 to 2,000 personnel. Norway's traditional balancing act with Russia has become impossible. The open water has forced the country to serve as the physical wall defending the North Atlantic. This shift is visible on the ground right now during Exercise Cold Response 26. 25,000 troops from 14 allied nations are deploying across the High North, training to fight in extreme freezing conditions. This map illustrates the Nordic Shield. With Sweden and Finland fully integrated into NATO, the alliance has drawn a continuous, unified defensive perimeter against the east. This strategy requires a posture of total societal defense. Allied forces are now directly integrating civilian infrastructure, like local Norwegian hospitals, into their combat planning. The High North has transitioned into a highly organized, heavily fortified military choke point. But to understand the full weight of this standoff, you have to look at the physical Earth itself. High in the Norwegian archipelago of Svalbard, the coastline at Forkastningsfjellet is actively collapsing into the sea through massive, deep-seated rock slides. This is a mechanism called thermal erosion. Rising air temperatures thaw the ancient permafrost, sending meltwater deep into the rock. The resulting water pressure destroys the structural cohesion of the stone, causing the mountains to fracture and slide. The exact same thermal energy shattering these cliffs is what melts the Arctic sea ice, opening the seaways for Russian warships and triggering NATO's military response. And the primary fuel driving this entire cycle is the 500 megatons of carbon Norway exports every single year. A half-century of hydrocarbon wealth did not secure a sustainable, peaceful future. The contradiction finally caught up to them, turning the High North into a collapsing, heavily armed battlefield.